Hey guys, Metal Jesus here, and today I am back with a video talking about some games that you might want to pick up in the PlayStation Store for the PlayStation Vita and the PSP. Now, this is somewhat of a companion piece to the PlayStation 3 video that I did about a week ago, but so many of you asked me to talk about some games that I think you might want to pick up for your Vita or your PSP, but I think for a lot of people it's going to be the Vita. Now, this is an interesting one because the Vita is a very versatile handheld system. It actually plays games from three systems. It obviously plays Vita games, but it also plays PSP games, both retail and also the minis. I'm going to get into that a little bit more, as well as PlayStation 1 games. And so in this video, I'm going to show you a bunch of games I think you might want to pick up before these go away. As of the making of this video, those stores are going to shut down in July and August. Now, it's going to be a mix of popular titles as well as some lesser known hidden gems. There's a lot to cover here, so I am going to go pretty quick. But before I jump into it, there has been a lot of talk lately about this battery issue with the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation 4, and whether or not you're going to be able to, play any of these digital games or even physical games. Now, I don't know if we know exactly what's going to happen because the PlayStation Network isn't shut down, and I don't think it's going to necessarily affect the handheld. I don't think it's going to necessarily affect the Vita, but again, we don't know for sure. But I know myself, I played Vita games without a Wi-Fi connection just fine. So I think, knock on wood, that these games will continue to work in the future as long as that Vita battery lasts. So, jumping right in, I'm going to start with some Vita games that you might want to check out that are on the PlayStation Store, starting with Tales from Space: Mutant Blobs Attack. Here is a 2D platforming game where you play as a blob that can eat things that are smaller than you. However, you continue to grow as you eat. It kind of reminds me of Katamari Damacy a bit, and you'll eventually grow to where you can start eating humans, and then you get to devour them too. This game is by the makers of Guacamelee, so their attention to detail and also the great gameplay really shines through here. I'm telling you, don't skip over this game. It's excellent. And by the way, it's also available on the Switch, so you have options there. Next up is Joe Danger 2, the movie. This is a game that I've had on my Vita for years now, and it is super fun. As you can see here, you play as Joe Danger, and you're playing through these movie-like Hollywood scenarios here where you are basically playing a stuntman. And it's very physics-based, kind of reminds me a little bit of the Trials series, but it's a little bit more varied than that. There's definitely some trial and error here, but thankfully it doesn't take a lot to restart a level when you die. Very addictive game, highly, highly recommended. Here is a game a lot of people told me to check out, and I'm glad I did. It is Gun Slugs. So this is a randomly generated run and gun game that just has an amazing retro-inspired chiptunes soundtrack. And I guess this game started life as a mobile game, but pretty much everybody agrees that it just got infinitely better when it came over to the Vita with actual buttons. No big surprise there, right? But yeah, definitely don't miss this game. It's awesome. Next up is a pretty cool game I just recently discovered. It's called Quell Memento, and this is a super chill puzzle game where you move pieces around on a single screen and try to solve them and basically unlock the next level. Now, honestly, this isn't something that you probably haven't seen or played before, but there's something about the simplicity and the design of this game that really kind of got my hooks into me and made me play it for several hours the other night. Plus, there's a lot of content here. You have over 150 puzzles, so definitely a lot of value if you are into these type of games. Next up is an action strategy game that is exclusive to the PlayStation Vita and actually requires it to play, so it won't work on the PlayStation TV. You see it here. That is Army Corps of Hell. I think this game is a bit of a sleeper hit, and I don't think it did very well when it first came out because it didn't seem like there was much buzz about it. And maybe that's because as an action strategy game, it is a little bit on the repetitive side, but I think it's got enough personality and style to it to I don't know, just basically stand out in the bunch. If you like these kind of games, plus you like the graphics here, also it has an amazing heavy metal soundtrack, you should definitely pick it up. And by the way, it's really cheap on physical as well, which is nice. So you have options there. You can get the digital if you want it cheap, or you can get the physical. Here is Demon Gaze. Now this is a Japanese RPG that mixes really fun and memorable characters with first-person dungeon crawling. This game feels very old school in its gameplay, but it has enough variety and personality to definitely keep you interested. Plus, the combat is very fast, so the grinding doesn't necessarily feel like a chore. And like I said, I love the characters in this. It's made me laugh out loud many times. Check it out. Here is Freedom Wars. This is an action RPG that actually sold really well in Japan, but I think continues to be somewhat unknown here in the States. Now, what's interesting about this game is that if you go into the PlayStation Store to buy a copy, you'll see the main game there, but you'll also see lots and lots of DLC. So there are weapon packs, character packs, there's soundtrack songs that you can download, additional items, new character voices, and a bunch more. And I think the reason why that exists is because it was so well received in Japan. But that also brings up the point that when the PlayStation Store goes away for the Vita, I assume all of that's going to go away as well. So something to keep in mind when you're buying these digitally, that you might want to, snag the DLC as well. And then here's a game that blew me away when I first got it on my Vita and continues to impress me even today. That, of course, is Killzone Mercenary. And as you can see by this gameplay footage here, it is a full-blown AAA quality first-person shooter on the Vita. It's a type of game that I wish we got more of on this system, but I'm glad that we got this one because it feels like something that you would play on, the PlayStation 3. It looks great. The graphics are still amazing today. It's got great controls. It uses both of the thumbsticks and a lot of the common controls that you would expect. It's definitely a highlight on the Vita, so if you don't have this game yet and you got a Vita, you definitely have to download it. Another game that I consider must play on the Vita, I actually recently replayed it on the Vita just because it'd been a while, that is Uncharted Golden Abyss. I'm a huge fan of the Uncharted series, and it's cool that the Vita got its own original game for it, and it's excellent. I mean, it plays just like you would expect on the big consoles, but again, on a handheld. Now, my only gripe with this game is that it does use a lot of touch and also motion that is built into the Vita. So, that gets a little gimmicky and a little tired, but don't worry, it's not a deal breaker. You're still gonna have a lot of fun with this game. Check it out. Next up is Unit 13, and this is by the developers that worked on the SOCOM series, at least the portable versions of the SOCOM series, and it's somewhat of a spiritual successor to that series, as you can see by this gameplay footage here. It's all about third-person shooting from cover, taking out bad guys. It's a really well-made game. It's unfortunate that I don't think it sold very well. I don't think it got much support, and that's a real bummer because, again, this is a pretty good game. It's not amazing. I think it maybe came on the heels a little bit too soon from SOCOM, but it was a nice attempt, and it's one that you should definitely play if you got a Vita and you like SOCOM. Next up is Tales of Heart R. So this is a highly regarded Japanese RPG that is considered to be one of the best in this franchise. And this is probably a really good time for me to remind people that the PlayStation Vita, as well as the PSP, are excellent JRPG machines. There are so many Japanese RPGs available on both systems and also available in the PlayStation Store. You literally could just play it for years and years and years, especially if you like those kind of games. Speaking of, a lot of people ran out and bought PlayStation Vitas when Persona 4 Golden was released. Persona 4 is a much-loved game. It originally came out on the PlayStation 2, and what's cool is that the Golden version on the Vita is an expanded version, so it includes a new character, new personas to use in battle, outfits, cutscenes, and more. Now, what's crazy is that the physical version of this game is quickly approaching $100 for a complete copy, so getting the digital version is a good option for a lot of people. And the game lived up to the hype, so it's definitely considered one of the best RPGs on the Vita. Now, if you're looking for more RPGs to play on the Vita, you might want to check out Soul Sacrifice and Soul Sacrifice Delta, which is the expanded version of this game. This is a third-person action RPG by the makers of Fate/Extra, as well as the Valhalla Knights series. Now, the sacrifice part of the game's title comes into play when you, as the character, will defeat some of the bigger enemies in the game, and you have a choice of either saving them or sacrificing them. And this actually extends to the multiple endings that you get in this game. And like I mentioned, there are two versions of this game. So if you get the Delta version, it came out a little bit later and adds some new bosses and some new content. And then I also want to mention another RPG called Unchained Blades. So as you see here, it is a first-person dungeon crawler. And like so many of these, it has a lot of really charismatic characters and dialogue. Now, it's worth noting that this game did get a physical release in Japan, but over here in the States, it seems like we just got the digital one. If I'm mistaken about that, please let me know down in the comments. But it's sad because they obviously put a lot of work into translating the text and then recording all the voices for the English version here. And this game has a strong pedigree of people who worked on it, including people who created Lunar, Grandia, and also Final Fantasy. Now, this did get a release on the 3DS as well, but again, we only got the digital version here, unfortunately. Next up is Super Stardust Delta. So this is a super slick top-down twin-stick shooter for the Vita that looks and plays great. So the reason why this game is so good, in my opinion, is because it's the same developer that also made really great shooters like Next Machina, Resogun, and also Alienation. And then here's a game I played a ton of. This is called Sound Shapes. So this is a quirky and really fun mix of 2D platforming and, I guess, music creation. The visuals definitely remind me of Loco Roco a little bit, and this is a very fun yet accessible game that, for whatever reason, just never got a physical release for the Vita. However, it is part of a PlayStation 3 compilation disc that came out a couple years ago. So you can either look for that physical version, which unfortunately is approaching like $300 for a copy of the disc version, or again, you can just buy it digitally here for way less. I also want to mention Gravity Rush, which for a long time was a Vita exclusive and also one of the must-play games on the system. It still is one of the must-play games because it's so unique and so interesting, although I do want to mention that they eventually did port it to the PlayStation 4 so more people could experience it. And as you can see by this gameplay footage here, it is a third-person action-adventure game, and the whole gimmick here is that you can control gravity in really interesting and fun ways. It's got a bit of a learning curve, and it can definitely get you turned around a little bit in this game, but once you get the hang of it, once you get the hang of the controls, it's a ton of fun. And now I want to move on to some PSP games that you can download and play on your Vita. Starting with Loco Roco, that's a game that I loved when it first came out on the PSP. It is a physics-based 2D platforming game where you combine and break apart these little creatures to get through levels, to solve different environmental puzzles. It's an absolute joy to play. I love this game. I've often mentioned in the past Pursuit Force on the PSP. This is a really fun racing shooting game where the whole mechanic is that you are a cop that can then leap over from one car to another, commandeer it, and then continue on the chase taking out bad guys. It's such a cool, fun game. I'd love to see it brought and remastered, remixed, remade, rebooted, whatever it would take to bring it to modern consoles. It's pretty cool. You can also buy and download Gurumin, A Monstrous Adventure. This is a game that I originally played way back in the day on my PSP, and it was extremely memorable and exclusive at that time. It's an action RPG, and it plays very similar. A lot of people compare this to some of the 3D Zelda games, and I think that's pretty accurate. Next up is a pretty cool hidden gem called Kenka Bancho Badass Rumble. So this is a 3D beat 'em up, and man, it is just completely over the top. It is very silly, but yet the combat is really fun. Plus there's some RPG elements here. It's definitely a cool game. Check it out. Next up is a game I'm probably going to butcher the title here because I never quite learned how to say it correctly. Maybe you can help me in the comments, but I'm going to say Jeanne d'Arc, or basically it's Joan of Arc. It's It's a retelling of that story. So this is basically a turn-based tactical RPG, very similar in style to Final Fantasy Tactics. But as you can see here, it is full 3D, and man, when I first got this game, I probably put 50, 60, 70 hours into this. There's so much content here. It's a absolute PSP classic. And speaking of tactical role-playing games that you probably should play if you haven't before, that of course, ZHP Unlosing Ranger versus Dark Death Evil Man. That is a game title. Now, if you can't tell by the title, this is a hilarious RPG game that everyone should play if you like these types of games. Laugh out loud, funny, over the top, but yet super cool, super fun to play. And in keeping with that theme of silly and fun games, you have Prinny, Can I Really Be a Hero? Plus the sequel, Prinny 2. So both of these games are spin-offs from the main Disgaea series, which, as you guys know, is known for being very silly and over the top.
Who in the steaming hell ate my dessert? Was it me, dude?
We may be dumb, but we're not that dumb, dude. We never eat your food.
We just acted like we didn't know it was gone, so you wouldn't get mad.
What's cool about these games is that they switch genres, so they're not just a RPG. As you can see here, it is a 2D platforming game. But the thing about this, though, is that it is known for its brutal difficulty. This game is very challenging. As a matter of fact, it's so challenging that it gives you 1,000 lives to burn through at the beginning of the adventure. And trust me, you're going to need them. And then next up is a game that I think most PSP owners will be very familiar with. That, of course, is Ratchet & Clank Size Matters. This was such a big deal when it got released on the PSP because, you know, Sony was bringing some of its biggest franchise to its handheld. And I love this game. Despite the fact that the PSP did not have a second analog stick, this does some really smart things with the controls, and it just looks and plays really well. This is a really well-made Ratchet & Clank game. Now, there is a PS2 port of it, which obviously most people I think should probably play over this one. But if you're looking for a portable version of it and you like Ratchet & Clank, check it out. And while we're on the subject of the PSP, I did want to bring up some of the minis that were released that you can play, you know, either on your PSP or your Vita. Now, if you're not familiar with minis, that was a really interesting time for Sony because essentially what they started creating were very small, inexpensive games that you could download, and they called them minis. And there are a ton of them that are in the PlayStation Store that are basically going to just go away in a couple months. And so I'm going to go fairly quickly through these, but starting with Nova. So Nova is a first-person shooter. At the time, it was definitely compared to some of the early Halo games, and I think that's fairly accurate. There's also Hercules Racing, which is a kart game that is a little bit on the generic side, but again, as a mini for a couple bucks, it's worth it. Now, here's a mini that I think is totally worth it. That is Cubix. So, as you can see here, Cubix is a take on the classic arcade game Kix, where you control this little dot or whatever. I don't know what it is. I think in Kix it was actually a spaceship, but you're basically trying to eat away sections of the surface and expose the inside of it to complete the level. It's kind of more difficult to explain than just to play, but trust me, this game's really fun. There's also Ace Armstrong versus the Alien Scumbag. So this is a pretty cool side-scrolling shoot 'em up that, as you can see here, has a clean kind of cartoony look to it. Although this game is not easy. Here is one of those endless running games called, well, I Must Run. So it's a fairly generic title too. But if you guys remember, this was all the rage with some of these mobile games and kind of small arcade experiences that you would get. And this is, you know, I think I paid $1 or $2 for this. And, you know, it's not great, but you get your money's worth. It's also worth noting that several publishers released arcade hits as minis as well. And what's great is that they're only a couple bucks. So you see Ikari Warriors here, which obviously many of us played a lot back in the arcades, as well as a 1985 top-down shooter HAL 21. Now, if that looks familiar, well, it's because it is almost a carbon copy, at least in how it plays, of Xevious. And then I do want to mention a couple PlayStation 1 games that you can download and play on your Vita or your PSP, and I do that a lot. Now, I covered a lot of PlayStation 1 games in my PlayStation 3 video, and all of those download and play just fine here. But it's worth noting that there is something about taking these on the go. And so sometimes I will have certain types of games that I'll play on a big screen in my living room, and others I want to be portable. And as you can see here, I do have a bunch of PlayStation 1 games downloaded on my Vita, and it's a mix of a lot of things, including Parasite Eve 1 and 2. These are really fun. I don't know how you describe these, basically survival horror games with a little bit of RPG elements in there, a little bit of sci-fi, definitely really cool games. As well as Mr. Driller, which I guess is kind of like an action puzzle-like game. It's a game I don't play a ton, but I like having it on my Vita because it's a little bit different than everything else I have in there. So it's fun to kind of jump in on, short play sessions. But I do love me some run and gun, and I love the Metal Slug series. So of course I always have a Metal Slug game on a handheld. For this one, I have Metal Slug X, as well as some big old RPGs, including Chrono Cross. I also have Final Fantasy VII, which I've played through at least twice, once on my PSP and also on the Vita. And I have Legend of Dragoon, which is an RPG put out by Sony to kind of win over the hearts of Final Fantasy VII fans. And unfortunately, I don't think it did very well, but it definitely has a cult following. It's a very, high quality RPG. And again, one I like to play on the Vita. All right, guys, well, that is fast and furious with all of the recommendations that you might want to check out from the PlayStation Store on your Vita or your PSP. And by the way, here at the end, I want to do a shout out to my buddy Reggie, who has been pumping out these videos over the last couple weeks. As you guys know, he is the PlayStation guru, and it's been really fun watching those videos. Actually, Reggie and I have been talking almost daily about these videos, kind of getting each other's point of view and getting some suggestions and stuff like that. So if you haven't checked out Reggie's series of videos, he goes even further into depth. So definitely check those out. And as always, guys, I want to thank you for watching my channel. Thank you for subscribing, and take care.